Hi everybody, and welcome back to another stream. And thank you very much for taking the time to join us this evening. And we've got a really interesting conversation ahead of us. But before we get to that, just the usual formalities, if you'll stick with me. So if you're watching this on Facebook, if you're still on Facebook, I'm not sure where you should be. Like and share. If you're on YouTube, like, share, make sure you hit notifications. Also follow me on brand YouTube, subscribe over there as well, where we can speak freely. That's all really important. And in addition to those platforms, which are all important, what I need you to do as well is check out the social media links down below. And you can find me on BitChute, Odyssey, and again on brand YouTube. You know, just folks, really need to emphasize, big tech, deep tech is not our friend. Deep tech does not allow honest conversations, and that's what we want to have. So it's really important that you wean yourself off the likes of YouTube and you go to some of these other platforms. Okay, so that's my lecture for the night out of the way. If you like what you're hearing from us, give us the thumbs up. That messes up the YouTube algorithm. That means that they know that you're engaging with us. So do that for what it's worth, please. That'll be brilliant. And then finally, last but by no means least, go to altnewsmedia.net/donate if you want, and drop a few pounds in the hat over there so we can keep the show on the road. Right. Well, with that all having been said, I'm really pleased to have on the stream tonight my special guest, Ilana Mercer.
Hi, David.
Hi, Ilana. Great to see you again. It's been too long since we spoke last, but we have loads to talk about tonight, and I think the viewers are going to really enjoy what I think needs to be a kind of frank conversation on a really important topic. You know, so much of the stuff that we see and we view is anodyne, and it's obfuscates, and it doesn't tackle the big issues. And what I like about you, Ilana, is you tackle the big issues head on, and that's what we need, and that's what I think the people who watch this need as well.
David, reality is the touchstone of truth. If you don't get to reality, if you don't distill every single thing to reality, then you've said nothing. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But the problem is that a lot of people prefer to live in fantasy. That is the reality, isn't it? You know,
and that's what we're talking about today, is a sort of an intellectual crutch that helps people, at least conservatives, avoid reality.
Yes, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah. Now, again, before we dive into this, just remember, you can follow Ilana over on ilanamercer.com. You can find her on Parler when it's up, which it isn't at the moment, on Gab, and on Twitter as well, actually. So Ilana and I, we mismatch. So I am banned from Twitter. I'm not allowed to be on Twitter. And of course, Ilana is similarly sent from the Facebook gulag, I think, Ilana. Isn't that right? Yeah, so so anyway, we cover a lot of these platforms, but you should check out. And obviously, Ilana, all her books and stuff, I will have descriptions down below for all these kind of things. So let's get to the topic. Ilana, you penned a really interesting column on the whole issue of, well, being truthful about that which is called it's communism, it's identitarian politics when it comes to some of these biggest issues. But that's not the truth, is it? If we just bring up can we just bring up the header to Ilana's column, because that sets the scene. Let's set it up for everybody. Yeah. I love the heading, by the Earth to Conservatives. I love that one, Ilana. The problem is systemic anti-whiteness, not Marxism, not ID politics. Yeah, so that's what you titled it, Ilana. And Jed, if we just go up, just the very intro, because Ilana, then you talk about it. And you can read this for yourselves, folks. But fundamentally, institutionalized systemic anti-whiteness yoked to white-hot hatred of whites. That's the creed. It's fast becoming entrenched across state and civil society in the United States and elsewhere, Ilana, as well, and elsewhere. Chiseled down, these are the building blocks of critical race theory. and I love this bit, Ilana, a specious sub-intelligent concoction originated by subpar intellectuals. Ilana, talk us through your logic. Where are you taking this argument?
I think it's manifestly and plainly true. I mean, our society now is just pervaded, whether it's from industry, the corporate Congress, it is anti-white. It is as simple as all that. And it actually occurred to me, I think by now even our English viewers are definitely familiar with what's his name, Julius Malema. He is a communist, of course, but when he gets up at a rally and he chants, kill the white, kill the Boer, if your intrinsic reaction is identity politics, Marxism, how interesting, then your chances of survival are very slim if you cannot identify, this militarist, murderous chant that has resulted and incited murder. If you have to have that intellectual patina, that crutch, in order to separate you from the reality of it. So that's sort of the imagery that I see played out. We haven't reached that in the US or in England, and hopefully we won't. But that's what I see conservatives do. The cognoscenti, whenever this manifestly anti-white outrage du jour happens, it's, the media are dividing us. That was Douglas Murray's argument when he strolled central London and approached Piccadilly Circus, and he was just bombarded with this foreign iconography of Black Lives Matter, and everywhere that it's so violent. And in this, the most English of cities, this is a direct import from America. It has nothing to do with England.
Yeah.
And he describes this reality and how, as an Englishman, he's just the manacles, the screams, the grunts, the very visceral and shocking iconography that is very not English, and he cannot bring it to the argument that this is alien. It's a form of colonization of England. It's imported from America. It's anti-white, it's anti-English, and doesn't belong in London. No, the media are dividing us. If not for the media or identity politics, it would be kumbaya and group hug. So
and that's the point, Ilana, isn't it? Because ultimately, in the case you've just mentioned, Douglas Murray, but it's not just him. It's 99%. A lot of them anyway. They all shy away. They do a little dance, and you think they're going to come to the finishing line, and then just before they get to the finishing line, they dive to one side. And as you say, it's this is identitarianism. This is Marxism.
Marxism,
that's a favorite one, isn't it? And of course that. But why do they? Let me ask you, why do you think they do that?
Well, I think you're being very kind, and you're saying that they can't bring it to the logical conclusion. But I take them at their word. We anoint, intellectuals that are not very intelligent, and I do really think that they can't see the argument through. I don't think they're very smart. Some of them, I would imagine, like Tucker Carlson, who is very smart and is doing a fabulous job stateside. I think he's prohibited from saying that. I give him credit, but most of them are just not very smart and can't see reality for what it is. They are, they are rigidified in these pat arguments, and that's it.
Yeah, but the consequences of that then are pretty devastating, because it allows critical race theory. It allows all of this to permeate, and they're not really going to call it out for what it is, are they?
Well, I don't think it should be even dignified. They often, accept the left's terms of debate, and they begin apologizing or rationalizing and dignifying these arguments, rather than slamming your fist on the table and saying, what you're doing basically is boiling ancestral bones up in a sort of hideous brew of anti-white hatred. I was not a slaveholder. I'm not a racist. F off.
Yeah, no, I agree, absolutely. If we could just, Jed, bring up the next bit here. I wanted to mention I mean, because you mentioned South Africa, and obviously, again, Ilana, it's to me, it's stating the obvious, but it needs to be stated so often and repeatedly. The ANC's problem isn't communism. It is, as you say, a white hot hatred of whites. I mean, again, it's a home truth, but it's a must needed home truth, because all I ever hear from if you like, our side is it's communism or it's Marxism. And
David, you know what I also hear is this. It's almost like as an old school South African. I was around there when P.W. Botha was prime minister, and then if he served in another capacity. So I've been through all the evolution, and so I know South Africa well. And what I see in the young South Africans, because of the total expunging of their history and of anything familiar from our generation, they're really looking to Candace Owens or to younger Americans to define the debate. And I find this absolutely toxic. It really is absolutely toxic. So I think that often it took ages for my book, Into the Cannibals part, to people preferred other analyses. And so continuously I've seen American analysts have South Africans on who speak, oh, yes, farm murders, communism, Marxism, and this is inherent. But communism and Marxism did not focus exclusively on blackening of whites. And this is the project of critical race theory and all these policy and whether they are in corporate America, in entertainment, et cetera, that is the bottom line. It is white hot hatred of whites. And this is what's animating everything. Most of these young people who get up at a Malema rally and with the fists, kill the white, kill the Boers, they were born into freedom after so-called freedom after 1994. And so they're also not very literate. Dare I say, there's a severe literacy problem in South Africa. There wasn't, by the way, not to promote apartheid, not so that you are accused of entertaining someone who does that, but they were not illiterate during those years in which there was a very active education program. However, these people were born into so-called post-apartheid South Africa. And so are they deferring to a complex political theory as Marxism when they demand the land of whites, when they demand the jobs of whites, when they insist that whites be expunged from politics and political representation, and their property be forfeit and their lives be forfeit? I very much doubt it.
But then Ilana, if we bring up, there's a tweet that you did here, and if we just bring it up here, which brings the issue back home to the States. Here's the United States president, an old, pale white man, pointing out white supremacists are America's most lethal terrorist threat. And you've obviously subtweeted that to the point, Ilana, Biden means white Trump voters or America's most lethal terrorist threat. And it's lovely. It's great to see you calling it out as it is, because that's exactly what he means, isn't it?
Yes. And I think the word that would be omitted, the adjective that would be omitted by our conservative friends, most of them would be Trump voters, right? That's what they do. Biden means Trump voters, not white Trump, because after all, this is not about race. How does Tucker put it? It's only about class. And whenever argument doesn't cohere to reality, I think my strength is distilling analytically things to reality. And whenever argument doesn't cohere to reality, I have a real hard time understanding it. Is it about class? I just, it moves away from my consciousness. I don't understand it when they speak bafflegab. So they would omit from that tweet, they would omit white, and they would say anyone who's a conservative, a Republican, right winger, this is who Biden and Kamala Harris are proceeding against. But you and I know that that's not. So everywhere is this big lie.
Yeah, and but I mean, there's so much hypocrisy as well. I wanted to bring up a couple of images here just to share with yourself and the people on the stream. And it's about the hypocrisy as well. Here's Coca-Cola. This is the board of Coca-Cola, who have been slammed for, I mean, their diversity training, urging workers, Ilana, to be less white. I mean, the animus doesn't get greater than urging an ethnicity, white people, to be told they need to be less white by a board which to my eyes is pretty much overwhelmingly white. And actually, and just before you answer this, we just flip up the next one, Jed, as well, because it's the same thing, really. Here's Disney, one of the wokest corporations of all, who have got 100-question white privilege checklist, Ilana, 100 questions, again, encouraging their white employees to check out their white privilege. And yet, look at the board. I mean, I don't see a lot of diversity there. What explains this?
You know, I'm the whole hypocrisy argument, sort of whataboutism, you know, sort of, are you against them having a board that might be merit-based? No. So what is the argument that we are making when we say, look at the hypocrites? That I never understand. In other words, if they have, they're the best and the brightest, so I'm okay with that. Just
yeah, but the argument is this, that they're demanding that their employees be more diverse, but they're not more diverse. Why is that?
Well, maybe they are somewhat following merit-based hiring practices, which I would hope they would. They just need to F off and leave us be. But they are definitely actually, in terms of corporate America, I wouldn't have thought that it would be possible in high tech even, you know, and I have quite a sort of intimate knowledge of high tech, given my husband. I wouldn't have imagined that you could get away with you know, hiring based on diversity in high tech when you do have to make a product that works, you know, and it has to be the best, and it has to ship properly, and has to be a success. But they do it, and so whether their boards are they are hypocrites, there's no doubt about it. But I think
and even though this is, I guess, you know, you're writing about it from an American perspective, but you're looking at other places. I mean, as we can show you in the next, we just bring up the next one as well. So we've got this issue over here as well, Ilana. It's a global issue. I mean, the BBC, the most grotesque digital parasite this side of the Atlantic, it actually refuses to, and for some jobs, to even employ white people in a country which is 85% white.
85.
Now, yeah, 85% white in the UK, you know, roughly. So
you know, David, this actually hasn't come to the US yet. However, I document this precise sort of memo going out, for instance, in Eskom, for the electricity company in South Africa. No more whites to be hired for the next 2 years. This is why I say in this column, we have arrived at a place, certainly in South Africa, communism is not a problem, is not an issue.
Yes.
You know, it's always a problem. Socializing the economy is always also a problem. It is a factor in our third way systems. We are all socialized to an extent. However, the systemic, every single social, political, economic institution in South Africa imperils whites. And that is the main feature. That's what informs the system in that society. And it's quickly catching fire in America. Now I see the BBC is doing the same thing.
Yeah, they are, yeah. Although I saw that, actually, jumping back again to your side of the Atlantic, the next slide, it also horrified me, this one, a bit. You know, this is Arizona. The Arizona Department of Education has apparently, the geniuses in it, have crafted an equity toolkit designed to teach critical race theory to kids, young kids, suggesting that babies, could be subconsciously racist. You know, where do you go with that, Ilana?
But, you know, there are this is where the debate becomes so much more complicated, because this is the whole attempt at actually denying biology, denying the reality that we do gravitate, although we are not unjustly racist, we do gravitate towards family, kin, communities of like-minded people, whether it be ideologically and babies. Research has shown that babies are evolution has seen to it that babies gravitate or smile or light up when they see people that are more copacetic or like them. So this is a sort of argument, biology and evolution and the nature of man that has enabled people to evolve and adapt and survive. This is now being made a malign and evil thing, and a baby will smile at a mom that looks more like it. It's a fact. It's a fact of biology. But is that evil? We have to go a step further and say biology is biology, nature is nature. Babies will do what they do, and this is nothing evil. And we won't dignify the stupid layering, theoretical layering over reality and over biology and over natural instincts of humanity.
Yeah, essentially, isn't it really, Ilana? It is the whole sort of critical race theory thing, which is permeating, like it's gone global. We have it in our institutions as well. Well, I have a bit of good news we'll come to at the end as regards that, but it still is permeated. It's being taught by, especially in education. It seems to be a favorite area to spread, and it's like a malignant gospel, as you say, which flies in the face of just natural biology and just life is the way it is. You see, for you and I, we look at the world and we look at we see things as they are, not as we might want them to be. But unfortunately, in 2021, you're then sort of treated as if you're some sort of extremist just because you state what, to paraphrase, the bleeding obvious. I don't see why we should be. I don't understand, why should we be castigated for saying things as they actually are, not as certain individuals or certain groups would want them to be?
Yeah. I think, having straddled a few continents over my lifetime, having lived in Israel and South Africa, a little bit in Europe, and having come to the Anglo-American sphere in Canada and the US, I find that the Anglo-American people are uniquely apologetic. They simply dissolve into puddles and become defensive. And that is why in many of my columns I've tried to impart the Israeli ethic. There's never been an apology, and Israel has been assailed and has done many unjust things. As a libertarian, I'm the first one not to be an Israel firster, but the people stand for who they are. They defend their identity and their right to an ethno-state if they are to survive as a people. And this is where Anglo-Americans and Canadians just refuse. They just dissolve into puddles, apologetic puddles, and refuse to stand strong. I think when it comes to critical race, when it comes to anti-whiteism, you really have to slam that fist on the table and say, F you, I'm out of here. If you can't argue, and not argue, it's a very complicated argument, and we've done a lot of chats between us. I've really deconstructed critical race, how it rapes reality. It's a totally artificial construct. It doesn't comport with reality. And to dissect it is complicated. You have to reject it if you're incapable of standing there. And you have to really get on the offensive, which is something conservatives especially are, to give them credit. I won't call them liberals, because I would think myself a classical liberal of the 19th century. But the progressive left has terrible ideas, a terrible philosophy, a malign philosophy, yet it is strong about its philosophy. It's a bully about its philosophy. And we have the great ideas, the transcendent philosophy, the eternal philosophy, the natural right philosophy. We come from the Ten Commandments to Thomist natural rights,
Yeah.
And yet we cower and apologize. Enough. You know, as someone who's a little outside of the culture, to me, it's very alien to keep apologizing for who you are.
But don't you think, Ilana, that's been a feature of more recent times? It hasn't all. We haven't always been as pathetically apologetic as we are now. There was a time when we were strong, and
Exactly.
why do you think what changed? What changed us that we have become?
David, you think so complexly. Don't do this to me. But it reminded me of another one of, we've been over Douglas Murray, another one of your anointed public intellectuals, Niall Ferguson, and
Yep.
he was on expounding about his latest book. I think it's something about pandemics, and he mentioned, I think it was on Tucker's show, as to why in the 50s, you know, why there was a flu epidemic as bad as the COVID.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was no lockdown, there was no fear mongering, there was grit, there was a realization of the severity of the situation. And once again, the so-called public intellectual just couldn't bring it to the next level of argument. He couldn't deduce what needed to be deduced. In other words, why was a country that was more traditional, more reactionary, more homogeneous, able to so much more infused with fellow feeling, you know, with patriotism, with a love for one another? Why was it able to come together during hard times? I mean, that's a non sequitur, isn't it? It's obvious why, but they just cannot say it. They cannot say it. So to me, whether it's health, patriotism, it's all associated with this terrible, disconnected, multicultural mess of pottage that has been brought on us from above, you know, and it's very hard to come together in such fragmented and deformed societies.
Well, we've had, Ilana, in the last week over here in the UK, we've had elections. And one of the big elections was in London. We had an election for who was going to be the new mayor of London. And a guy called Sadiq Khan, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Well, he's the mayor now, isn't he? He's the
mayor. He got re-elected. And in the 4 years since he's been mayor, stabbings, gang culture, jihad, all these things have rocketed in London. But Sadiq tells us that diversity is our strength. You see, diversity is our strength. So as London becomes unrecognizable compared to, let's say, most other parts of the UK, we see almost the things kind of breaking down, which is, you see, Ilana, I think your book, Into the Cannibal's Pot, I know you were drawing lessons from the South African experience for the US, but I think it's as true for us in the UK. Places like London manifestly demonstrate actually some of the points you make in the book, I think. So, you know, so the whole diversity thing is the deconstruction of a homogenous society and its replacement by just a mess.
And remind me of that scholar Putnam, I think his name was, Dr. Putnam, who did the quintessential research on diversity and actually suppressed it. It's in the book somewhere. I haven't brushed up on it. But he did this longitudinal, massive study of diversity. And he actually had to suppress the findings because they were so alarming. The more diverse a city, Los Angeles, the most diverse place, is the most miserable. The more people tend to hunker down, the more distrust, the less participation in society, the less volunteering they do, the more ennui they experience and hopelessness. And he documented it. We have this so-called social science. We have it. From one of the most respectable bowling for he did a lot of magnificent research, and this was suppressed a while, then came out in the Wall Street Journal, I think about 10, 15 years ago. It's in the Into the Cannibal's Pot. And especially pronounced are these effects on of multiculturalism and diversity, deforming diversity on the host population. They especially become disenfranchised and depressed. And you see that in not only rural white America, and I imagine in the UK as well.
Exactly. It's exactly the same, Ilana. There's no difference. That's why it's such important. But I do have some good news. I always like to finish things with a positive note. If we can bring up the final slide. Who says Britain isn't fighting back? Here you go, Ilana. It's something to cheer you up. The British government says teaching critical race theory, white privilege is in fact breaking the law. There you go. Isn't that a positive bit of news?
And that's your government, both parties? Yeah. Both parties.
Well, it's the governing party, so it doesn't matter what the lefties.
Oh, there's no coalition. Yeah.
No, so that's it.
So the next leg of the sentence should be, and what are they going to do about it? Are they going to? Libertarians will always dissemble. Do we ban this? Yes, because this breaks the natural law. You ban this shit. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
So I just hope that happens. What do you think?
Well, the intent is there at any rate. One of my problems is I have such little faith in politicians, Ilana, to actually stand by what they say. So when you write stuff, I mean, you're standing over every sentence, every word, because you consider it. Sometimes politicians they say the easy thing, but to oppose critical race theory, even in Britain, it takes a bit of courage to do that, I suppose. So if they then, having said it, do something about it, and if our courts were to be then following
now you have to have the lobbyists, people like you, real intellectuals. You have to bring pressure, because this is a huge achievement. If a bunch of idiots, because government really, the flotsam and the jetsam float to government, right? The worst of humanity. I mean, it's not the best people. Our Marjorie Green, our very controversial politician, recently said she arrived in Congress and she couldn't believe how unimpressive and second-rate the people were. And you have to think of people who are incapable of making it in civil society. So the fact that your government has said that and now pressure has to be brought to bear to ban this. And I would make the argument too that it is a foreign imported American construct, thought up in our universities. It's alien to Britain. You have nothing to do with this. And the other thing, I have a bit of good news of my own. The Olympics Committee, is it? The Olympics Committee, they have said they will not countenance any of this kneeling, any of this Black Lives imagery. They won't have any of it, and it's going ahead without it. So that's a good news as well.
Yeah, it is actually that because I think the Japanese, because the Olympics are in Japan, aren't they? So their views on some of these things are quite good, actually. I think so. I welcome that. I mean, one of the sickening things about sport here in Britain is the football, which is big here in the UK. They still take the knee. These idiots push. They do it because, Ilana, the football stadiums are empty. No fans allowed in because of COVID. So they've got big empty theatres so they can virtue signal on the pitch and take the knee. And it's pathetic. It's the most pathetic thing ever.
But how quickly has this whole thing mutated to America, from America to England? I mean, that's something you all have to reject.
Okay, so sorry about that, Ilana. Unfortunately, my broadband is suboptimal, but what can you do about it? So just to kind of bring sort of things to a conclusion, I think the whole point of your article is that we need to speak plainly and we need to call things for what they are, not the euphemisms, not the ameliorating the issue. And I think that's such an important thing to do.
And I think the one in the paragraph before last, the penultimate paragraph, I make the point that the reason, conservatives gravitate towards the communism, Marxism argument and I can see why other people would be drawn to it, is because the methods of thugs, if you anatomize the methodology of thugs, communism, whether it's fascism and leftism, are very similar. So they're atavistic, boorish, and violent. So, however, critical race policies do not amount to communism. They are strictly aimed at anti-whiteism, and that we have to remember. And unless we confront reality, anything that coats reality and separates the individual from reality in his analysis prevents adaptive action, because clear thinking, after all, mediates adaptive action. So whether you think to yourself, babies are being inculcated as racists, I'm not going to go to send my child to kindergarten. I'm going to secede from primary, secondary, and tertiary education. So these are conversations one has to have once one has a clear perception of what's happening. But if you think of Julius Malema, oh, that's interesting, identity politics, kill the farmer, kill the Boer. If you are so confused and obfuscating, and some very powerful people are actually speaking in tongues at us,
Yes.
So.
Yep. Absolutely right. Yeah. Well, Ilana, that's why it's such a joy to have you on the stream, because I love to speak plainly, and I love the way you absolutely shoot from the hip, tell it like it is, you think it through, it's cogent. And suffice to say, folks, by the way, I mentioned Ilana's IlanaMercer.com, where you can get her articles. Ilana, you've also got Barely a Blog. You call it Barely a Blog, but that you're doing yourself down a bit. It's really interesting, and you should, by the way, folks, you should regularly read Ilana's Barely a Blog, where you put up ideas and formulations and stuff, which I think is really good as well.
Yeah,
so
all my columns are culled from the blog, so that's really my research. But I think I began the blog when blogging was such an anathema. It was so writers don't blog, and so it was sort of déclassé to blog, and now we tweet in 140 characters. So we're down from writing articles to blogs, which are quite well formulated, at least on Barely a Blog, to grunting on Twitter. So.
Yeah, I know. The problem is,
admiration is mutual, David. Thanks.
Well, look, can I thank you? I'm sure all the viewers will want to thank you as well for being with us here this evening. Thanks for giving up your time. Thanks for explaining, your reasoning. And I think it's important, folks, that voices like Ilana's are heard loud and proud, and many people as possible can get the insights that Ilana has. So, Ilana, thanks again for being on the stream. Thanks everybody for putting up with my freezing streaming broadband, and I'll catch up with you folks later on in the week. That's it from us for tonight. Good night, everybody.